Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another BRAP. It's Wednesday. It's great to be back. Great to be back. Didn't have a show last Wednesday, but I was actually traveling for work. Had to head down to the Sunshine State of Florida, and I was an interesting trip down to Florida. Flight got delayed like 7 hours. Well, I got stuck at an airport for like 7 hours, but anyhow, I actually did do a BRAP rant on Saturday, this past Saturday with Game Logic. So if you haven't had a chance to check out that rant, definitely check out last Saturday's rant. But great to be back. There's a lot of gaming news to talk about. We are close to Starfield, and I'm excited for one. And we're going to discuss Starfield tonight. Starfield's one of my, if you've been listening to the show, Starfield's one of my most anticipated games of 2023. It's actually one of my you may have heard me say this, a game that I felt could be a game of the year contender. I know it's early. No one's played it yet except for the people that are reviewing it right now, but just given Bethesda's pedigree, you never know. I think that there's probably a chance that this game could probably be another good entry in some of the games that they've made, the Elder Scrolls Fallout series of games that they've made. But let me sec here. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to the game, to say the least. So let's see here. The screen just went black. I don't know what's going on here. Let me see something here. That's really weird. We just lost the BRAP screen. I don't know what's going on here. Give me just a second here. Let me see what's going on. Let me see if I can see if that works. That should, let's see. See if that did the trick or not. Looks like that worked. Okay, yeah, that was really weird. I don't know what happened there. Had some issues with Streamlabs there, so sorry about that. That was strange. I never had that happen before. So yeah, Mike S says I can't wait for the embargo to lift. Thank you, Mike S. Yeah, the BRAP logo is back. Yeah, again, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Technical difficulties, but yeah, the embargo is lifted. We're gonna have reviews tomorrow. So we're going to discuss the Starfield reviews, kind of give our thoughts on what we think the reviews might come in like in terms of Metacritic, things like that. Tell you what's going on, Ryan. But before we get into all the topics, plus the PlayStation Plus price increase, we'll talk about that. And then there's some reports of the subscription services hurting some indie developers and publishers. Great article of that in GameIndustry.biz. We'll talk about that and some other Starfield related news as it relates to the PC, potential PC performance and specs. So do me a quick favor. I am going to drop a link here in the live chat. If you do me a solid, just retweet the link or post the link on your favorite social media channel. So give me just a second here. I do need to do something else here. Need to let everyone know that we're live. All right, let's see here. I gotta say, 2023 has been an incredible year for gaming. By the way, I've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 is my game of the year right now. I want to say that it's, I'm coming off playing Tears of the Kingdom, Final Fantasy 16, Baldur's Gate 3. Now I'm going to be jumping into Starfield. Baldur's Gate 3 is incredible. Just incredible RPG. I was actually having a conversation with somebody who plays a lot of tabletop D&D, and they're playing Baldur's Gate 3. And they don't play a lot of video games, but they're playing Baldur's Gate 3, and they absolutely love it. They absolutely love it. So And this individual is actually a dungeon master for the group that he does D&D with. So his perspective on Baldur's Gate 3 was just fascinating to hear somebody who still plays the game, the tabletop version of the game, and is playing Baldur's Gate 3 right now. So they've nailed it. I mean, it's just a fantastic game. Actually, I was playing Baldur's Gate 3 prior to going live. So yes, Captain Ply Game Pass price did go up as well. We'll talk about that. Again, we'll talk about the PlayStation price increase here in just a little bit. But 2023, I mean, just a great year in gaming. We just got the reviews for Sea of Stars, and that game is being critically reviewed well. If you look at the Metacritic, actually, let me pull up the Metacritic real quick for Sea of Stars. Let's see here. All right, Sea of Stars Metacritic. Currently sitting on a 91 Metacritic. Yeah, and then we had Armor Core 6, which just came out last week. And what's the Metacritic for Armor Core 6? It's sitting at 86 Metacritic right now. Tippy says, I'm not happy with Sony right now. Okay, we'll talk about that. Assuming you mean the PlayStation price increase, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, just look at all these games that have released this past year, the last couple months. I mean, again, I've said this on this show. I don't think this is discussed enough. I don't think we celebrate enough this year enough in terms of gaming. 2023 has just been incredible. We still have Spider-Man 2 coming. As you know, Starfield early release is happening this Friday. We have Forza Motorsport, I believe, coming later this year as well. Remnant 2 just came out. My guess is Remnant 2 deserves more recognition as well. Yeah, Remnant 2, they're very well received by critics, reviewed well. Was number one for the month of MPD July. So, it's just a great year. A great year in video games. So I'm seeing some of the reaction of people saying about, and I know this relates to Sony's increase of the PlayStation Plus services, and player saying the problem is Sony charging $80 to use internet connection versus Microsoft charging $60. But Microsoft's still charging more for their Game Pass subscription service, player. So I mean, it's give and take. I mean, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. This is an instance where consumers are going to have to, make a choice. Some consumers are going to be okay with this. Some consumers are going to reevaluate their desire to keep PlayStation Plus. Others are going to leave the service. So, player. Day one versus old games. Okay. Sure. If someone sees value in that, fine. But not everyone's going to see value in day one. Frankly, Microsoft really hasn't knocked it out of the park with day one releases. I mean, PlayStation Plus also has more games than Game Pass. So again, these are things that consumers are going to have to weigh. Do they want Microsoft's first party games day and date? Do they see value in Microsoft's first party? If they do, and they see more value in that, then they'll probably go to Game Pass. If people find the 800 or so games in PlayStation Plus, they see more games being more value to them, then they'll go that route. Again, I mean, there's no right or wrong here. This is kind of the problem with the dialogue. I see kind of where this is going. Player. So does Sony also has third-party day and date as well. They both do. The biggest differentiator is Sony doesn't have day and date on their first-party stuff. But again, I mean, I think the problem with this conversation, I know where this is going to go, is that people this isn't black and white per se. This is this is an instance where consumers are going to have to evaluate what they find value in, and there's no right or wrong here because every consumer value is subjective. Value is subjective to to each consumer. Each consumer values things differently, and so I think what I don't want to see in the conversation is that there's got to be this right or wrong, and which one is doing better. They're both doing things differently, and consumers are going to value those things that Xbox and Sony are doing much differently. And some are going to see value in it, and some others, and some others won't. And that isn't different than any other consumer product that we interact in. But often we treat gaming as it's immune to its or subject to its own, market dynamics, economics, or laws of economics. It's just not. Gaming is another consumer product. The things that impact gaming impact the same things that impact other consumer products impact gaming as well. So anyhow, all right, give me just a second here. Yeah, so back to 2023. Great year in video games. And I've said this on numerous occasions on this show. Numerous occasions. This is a great year in video games, and it should be a year that's celebrated considering how slow things were during the pandemic, and now we're 3 years removed from the pandemic, and I mean it's going to be interesting to see what else is coming down the pipeline, and what else is going to what other what the other platform holders have in the pipeline as well. So I'm excited. Starfield tomorrow. Starfield reviews tomorrow. Starfield this Friday. I am excited. I cannot wait. Game Logic, what's going on?
Hello, my friend. How are you?
Good. The conversations around people being angry at Sony and the comparisons of Game Pass versus PlayStation Plus have started already, and I just look. We haven't gotten to the topic yet, Logic, but what I'm telling people is, look, there's no right or wrong here. Consumers are going to have to make choices. Consumers find values in different things, but of course, people want to debate which one is the best, and that best is subjective to each individual consumer. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Unless you want to just jump into it, man.
That's totally up to you.
All right, let's jump into the PlayStation. Okay, let's do that. Let's jump into the PlayStation price increase, plus price increase. So Logic, you and I had this conversation earlier today, and I guess my takeaway from the conversation was that, and I think you and I both, what I just said is that consumers are going to view these things, this increase differently. People value things differently. And just to go over real quick, the PlayStation Plus subscription service. So this is going to happen next month. So the service's annual essential plan will go from $60 to $80. The extra plan will go from $100 to $135. And the premium plan will go from $120 to $160. The new prices go into effect starting September 6th. Now, I am on the higher tier. Sony did say if you're currently subscribed to PlayStation Plus, Sony said if you're currently subscribed to PlayStation Plus, the price increase will take effect until your next renewal date or after November 16th. But if you make any changes to your subscription, such as upgrades, downgrades, or buying additional time, you'll have to pay the new rate. So this will, in fact, go into effect globally, and Sony says it will allow the company to bring high-quality games and value-added benefits to the service. So it did say that the yearly plans will still come out at a discounted rate as opposed to the 1 or 3 month subscriptions that it currently offers. So just a quick point here. PlayStation Plus did, or the new version of PlayStation Plus. Remember, they combined PlayStation Now, PlayStation Plus together. That did launch last year, and I don't remember the exact date, but it did launch last year. I do remember that. So, and then for the month of September, PlayStation Plus will include the game Saints Row, Black Desert Travel Edition, and Generation Zero. All right, so those are the increases that Sony announced today. Just my quick 2 cents, and I said this to you earlier today, Logic. Yeah, look, I'm not necessarily thrilled about paying more money for services. I'm not excited about paying $40 more a year, and I'm in the process of reevaluating whether or not I want to continue my subscription. I don't. Again, I keep subscription services primarily for my family because the kids utilize PlayStation Plus quite a bit. Actually more so than Game Pass. And so I need to reevaluate that and figure out whether or not I'm getting the ROI that I want, or if my children are actually using it enough where I feel like their usage justifies me spending the 120 or 140 now, or 160 I should say, for this service. So that's where I stand with the service. Look, I don't begrudge anyone who doesn't want to pay more for anything. I don't think consumers generally want to pay more. But I do think I do think that of course player saying if you only have a PlayStation you're really bad because you have to pay to play online for $80. Okay, well, I mean, I think that's a choice player that each consumer is going to have to figure out if that's something they want. If not, there's certainly other avenues that they can explore. But anyhow, that is where I'm at right now, Logic. I'm just at a point where I'm just reevaluating whether or not I want the service. I've seen some people say they're going to cancel. I've seen other people say they're okay with it. Again, I just think it really just depends on each consumer's how they perceive value and what their use case is. So, what are your thoughts, Logic?
The standard 3-part thesis. And while I'm talking now, people in the chat, if you guys want to give a sound check to mic levels between BRAP and I, let me know if my mic needs to be lowered. It's kind of impossible for me to do on this end without, because I don't have everything going through my OBS. But standard 3-paragraph thesis, right? Doesn't impact me. I'm going to continue on with the service. I mean, the breakdown is it's an extra $3.33 per month. Yeah, I just lowered it. Let me know if how it sounds now. At the end of the day, it's a 26% discount in comparison to paying the annual price. So to me personally as a consumer, it makes zero difference. So the way just I evaluate subscription services, I had a bucket that I was paying for cable when I cut the cord. I basically, so number one, I took my internet service out of that bucket because that's to me, that's a utility. That's an essential to me. It's no different to me than electricity or water or gas. And so the remainder is I fill that bucket up with subscription services as much as I choose to, as long as it doesn't go over that bucket. This doesn't cause an overflow. So to me, it doesn't bug me. If I get a follow-up after Apex, if you say my mic still needs to be lowered, it seems that I'm seeing everybody else in the chat say that it's okay at this point. So to me personally, directly, it doesn't matter. How will it impact? How do I think it will impact other consumers? I think the response that we'll see from other consumers is that you'll get some churn this quarter. From people whose subscriptions are up for renewal, who were buying in at the 12-month SKU, because those are the only people it's impacting. Everybody who's paying month to month or 3 months at a time, it doesn't impact them, and so they're not going to react to it. The people who are at the 12 months, if they're paying attention, 2, if there was some email that went out. I don't know that an email has gone out.
I haven't seen an email,
but. Okay, but the other thing is, remember,
and that would be nice, Sony, if you send me an email. But go ahead.
Yeah, most people are on auto renew. So most people, this thing's just going to re-up and they're not going to react to it. They may react to it thereafter. Every once in a while, sometimes I'll get something that'll trigger, and and I'll notice it, and I'll be like, oh no, I don't want to do that, and I'll go back retroactively and cancel it. But at that point, I've already paid for another year, so the impact to Sony is going to be negligible. What do I think is going to be the impact to Sony as a business and as a strategy? Like I said, I think you're going to see some churn this quarter. I think that maybe they'll lose, I don't know, maybe 1 million subscribers. I don't think that they're going to lose a lot. And in terms of, why they're doing this and what's the play and why does it matter, I don't know that Sony cares if there's a loss of numbers for PlayStation Plus, because I don't think that their strategy is as independent on the subscription service. So, I mean, when they converted everyone over from PlayStation to Plus to PlayStation Now, their numbers took a huge jump in PlayStation Plus. So I don't really care. I don't think that they care if they churn, right, a small number. What's gonna happen is they're gonna, what's coming up in the queue is they're gonna roll out the 4K service, and I think that's gonna see some traction with people onboarding onto the service right slightly thereafter this price increase. So I don't think it's a big hit to the business. I think it will impact some consumers who are of a certain stripe. It doesn't impact me personally.
Yeah. Again, I don't disagree with you, Logic. I there's going to be some churn, but again, I think each consumer is going to have to make a choice and kind of, like I said earlier, reevaluate whether or not they find value at that price point. I'm one of those consumers right now. I'm trying to figure out if this is something that I'm going to want to partake in. So I mean, it just.
But I think I would also contend, Brett, that's because you pay attention to this stuff. I mean, so if we put it in the context of the consumer, right? Why do you sign on for a subscription service? You sign on to it for convenience, so that you don't have to be bothered. That's one reason. And then 2, you're mentioned the family, right? Again, for convenience, so you don't have to be bothered by people not having access to other stuff, right? I mean, I subscribe to Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon Prime Video, right? The vast majority, the biggest weight of why I do that, it's in other services I subscribe to, but I can onboard those and offboard those, right? I don't really like. There are some services I subscribe to that I don't care if I drop the subscription for a couple months. There's those 3 core I never do, and why? Because I don't want to deal with the conversation of people squawking about not having access to that stuff. So I'm like, look, these are the 3 services you have. You have access to them. They fulfill your needs, right? But so for me as a consumer, I'm never going to probably touch those 3 services. I would put Disney Plus in there now too, because that would cause a big squawking. So it's mostly for convenience, so I don't have to be bothered. So given that is probably the vector that a lot of people do, and to me, it's much more of an egalitarian consumption approach than cable, right? So for people who subscribe to services for those reasons, even if you have a person who buys a PlayStation Plus who doesn't necessarily like to buy a lot, and you look at the PlayStation Plus premium content, you have, I'm not sure exactly what the line of demarcation is date-wise, but everything is in there from this generation. I want to say that isn't more recent than the last 12 months. So anything that's come out since the PlayStation 5 launched is on the service, unless it's come out in the last year, I think. And so if you're paying even $160 a month, a year, the price of, let's just call it 2 games, and you're not a person who's in the zeitgeist, who has the FOMO, who's trying to play every single thing as soon as it comes out, if you're a budget-oriented gamer, there's still good value proposition in it for you if you approach things that way, and you're not buying singular titles. Now, that doesn't necessarily fit the demographic of the typical PlayStation consumer, I don't think. However, if you're on that end of the spectrum and you're worried about budget, you're still in a good position.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, Logic. Let me grab this super chat here real quick. Jeff B. Gaming with the $5 super chat says, PlayStation Plus Premium plus EA Play 149 or say I'll just say 150 plus $30, still cheaper than $17 for 12 months for Game Pass Ultimate, but it sucks for Essential tier. Thank you for that super chat. You know what's I posted the announcement on Twitter today that or on X, I'm going to call it Twitter. That PlayStation was increasing their price for the PlayStation Plus service, and I wasn't going to bring this up, Logic, but I this really bothers me in the conversation, the discourse around video games, when people are like, well, you and because I'm on Crossfire Fridays, I probably won't be on Crossfire this Friday, but people say, somebody said to me, "Will you Mooch have a 2-hour segment on Crossfire complaining about it just like you did with Game Pass?" And the individual saying that when and I asked him, I said, "What did we specifically discuss on Crossfire regarding Game Pass price increase?" And he says how the dollar deal and increase is bad and will drive subs down. And I guess what bothers me with some of these responses is that when you offer something for $1, and you just said the exact same thing, and I agree with you that there's going to be churn here. That when people say that there's going to be and this is this is my problem with the conversation in gaming. Like, people can't reasonably think or have some kind of a critical or some kind of critical analysis or thought about the impact to price increases potentially, especially when you're offering something at $1, that there's going to be churn. That isn't based on hate. That isn't based on a dislike for a platform. And I really wish, Logic, that we could get away from that. People could get it. Well, maybe I'm putting too much faith in people. But I think it's an unfortunate take because it's not about, people are so wrapped up with emotion about their platform of choice and people offering some critical analysis to their platform of choice, that you end up getting comments like this, that somehow that the dollar deal and increase being bad and driving subs down is somehow a negative thing. No, it's just it's an analysis of the impact of price increases to a consumer product or services. I mean, we see this with other services. We've read articles where we've seen increases in particular products where the demand for that product has gone down, or there's been churn for subscription services when prices have gone up. So it just, and then to call it bias, it's getting old, Logic. It really is, man. Like, it's getting.
Well, I mean, the thing is, there's two groups of people who are having two different conversations. There's one group of people who's conflating the conversation between technical, financial, business, marketing, analysis, and how they feel about a product. If you're actually making a credible breakdown and decomposition of what's going on in the market and in the industry, that must, by definition, be inherently decoupled from how you feel about a product. And there's people who don't do that. There are people who express their opinions on what they think is going on the market and the industry based on how they feel about PlayStation or Xbox, and that's not what we do here, and that's not the conversation we have. So those are just people who, and again, those are people who, because they're basing, their opinions on how they feel, or haven't done the due diligence and, typically don't have the domain expertise to do those decompositions and do those breakdowns, which is, why I've tried on this show to start, compartmentalizing my responses in terms of how it impacts me, how I perceive it's going to impact other consumers and how they're going to react versus how, what is the impact, to the business.
Exactly.
I mean, I see a lot of comparisons out in the chat with a lot of people saying, this is my value evaluation of Game Pass versus this is how I feel about, PlayStation Plus. And my whole thing is, how does how somebody feels about Game Pass matter if they don't have an Xbox? right? So the vast majority of the market, 60 to 80% of the market, is going to have been impacted by both of these price changes, right? The one that Game Pass did a couple of months ago, and the one that's going on now. Most of them are not going to be are only going to be impacted by one or the other, right? They're not going to be impacted by both. So a lot of the conversations that you're going around Twitter about how people are reacting, but that's an incredibly small percentage of the market, and so the core breakdown and analysis to do is, if you're on PlayStation, how are we expecting that reaction to go for the PlayStation consumer, right? And what I said was, I expect some people will be bugged by it and there'll be some churn, and then at the end of the day, that I don't think it's going to be in the noise and nothing that Sony cares about. The commentary on the Game Pass price increase, the difference there is kind of what I mentioned before, right? Who's most dependent upon their subscription service and their subscription model? And the reason there was more conversation, at least on our show, around the impact of the Game Pass price increase is, my question was, across the industry, we're hearing and we're understanding that subscriptions are stagnating in terms of growth. The Xbox numbers, as they have stated themselves in their business model, is much more dependent upon Game Pass growth and has much more of a focus on Game Pass growth. Which by the
way, is why we talk about Game Pass so much. People have said, "Oh, you spend so much time talking about Game Pass." Well, we do, because that is Microsoft's. I mean, like as Slobo said, the Game Pass is the platform now. That is right. That is Microsoft's focus right now, is to grow that subscription service. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right, because you don't hear about them being focused on growing sales numbers. You don't hear them being focused on other matters of the business. You hear them being focused on growing Game Pass. And my question at the time was, okay, so subscriptions are stagnating. Your own numbers have failed to meet goals, as indicated by Microsoft's own statement. And I've said, and you have this business model that is tightly coupled to your strategy of growth, and you are concurrently raising prices. So my question was, how is that going to balance out? Like that seems an antithetical, right, approach, or at least approach that's going to cause a problem, because in most cases on services, you're gonna raise prices, you're gonna experience churn, you're gonna have growth flatten, right, and then it's going to take some time to pick back up again, right? All of which is moving rearward in terms of your overall desire and objective. And so Ryan's saying, surprisingly, how people feel impacts markets and products all the time more than you like. So Ryan, I totally understand that. I totally understand that how somebody feels obviously has a direct impact on usually. I would say within the gaming market, I find it often those needles move in different directions. But what I'm saying, Ryan, is what we hear about how people feel, which is what we hear largely the volume on Twitter, and we hear largely the volume on comments on YouTube. As I continuously say, people don't understand, and they don't extrapolate, and they don't platform off of the fact that is an incredibly small percentage indicator of the market. So that's why a routine theme on this show is there's the things that people yap about and the things people cause a really great volume about, and then we see the needle in the market in the industry moving differently. Just like we saw a large volume of people who were pushing back and counter to the notion of the PlayStation DualSense Edge, right? Mm-hmm. Huge volume about that, and battery life. And then what happens? It becomes the highest selling gaming peripheral 2 months running, right? Actually driving that particular metric, right, past historical norms.
Yeah, I mean, do you remember how that conversation around battery life was so? People were so angry about that. People were very, very upset, and it's funny. Like if you want to get a pulse of the market, you don't go to Twitter. You just don't. Right. What happens in the market is always like Twitter is like Michael Pachter. Running joke on Michael Pachter, he always gets it wrong. So Twitter is like Michael Pachter. If you look at what happens, in the market, and the DualSense Edge is a great example of that. If you would have only listened to people's reactions on Twitter, you would have said to yourself, "Oh man, this thing's DOA. It's done. Nobody's gonna want this. The battery life is terrible. I can't. There's,
Well, I said myself, I don't know who it's for. Like, I don't know who needs it on PlayStation.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, you don't have a crap ton of precision racing games. I mean, there's only two things that drive need for a device like that is precision racing games and precision first-person competitive multiplayer shooters. And I don't personally think you have those at really high volume. Like, I don't associate the PlayStation brand with a hyper focus on that type of content, right? And so I'm like, I don't really know who it's for, but you get the knock-on effect that we talked about with Portal, which is that it's very Apple-esque, it's very Apple-like, right? That consumer base, people like having all the things in the ecosystem, and I think Sony's doesn't ignore that, right? And they build things for people who they want you to walk into their home, walk into their game room, and have all their white stuff right over in the corner with the PlayStation branding on it.
Yeah, I mean, like PlayStation's taking a very, whether you agree with it or not, and I've seen, especially after the announcement of the PlayStation Portal, but they are clearly taking a very Apple-esque type approach. We talked about this last Saturday on the BRAP rant, but they really are. I mean, people want, and that's why they're making these devices. They know that people are buying. They know that people want them. They know that it's for that hardcore PlayStation consumer. But yeah, with regards to DualSense Edge, I mean, like if you would have again listened to Twitter, like I said, you would have thought this thing was DOA, and it's what is it, like the best-selling peripheral of 2023? I forget what.
Well, at least 2 months running is the statistic I've seen. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, so I take Twitter kind of with a grain of salt because a lot of it is an argument about who's right and who's wrong. It's about winning. It's about handing out L's. Keeping the same energy, that kind of nonsense. There was something in the live chat that I did want to address quickly, and I lost it, but.
So Max has a question. Aren't subscriptions naturally going to stagnate to a point once a degree of market saturation has been reached? And so yeah, Max, I believe that. So number one, I think that's impactful in two contexts, right? Number one, one of the things that BRAP has been getting yelled at for was reposting a comment that I actually found on GameIndustry.biz about right where kind of PlayStation and Xbox game sale or console sales were, right? And the fact of the comparison between where those consoles are, the current consoles are in comparison to the previous generations, and one of the things is that a large part of the Game Pass original baseline numbers, and I know that PC is moving in a direction of growth that they think will is surpassing consoles. But a large number of their Game Pass subscriptions originally came from console owners, and they're not selling consoles now, right? Or not selling them right in a direction of growth, and it's behind where Xbox One was. And so, if a large percentage of your foundational basis of Game Pass subscribers comes from console, and you're not selling consoles, but that maybe indicates a problem, and maybe that indicates that you are hitting that onboarding saturation point with your console base. And so that's going to incentivize a company to do different things, to incentivize people to onboard via other hardware means, right? Which Microsoft is doing. And so in terms of their overall business model, maybe that's good. But if you're a consumer and you're on console, right, that means that they're turning their focus and attention to other devices and other service plays, and that might be concerning for you, right? I constantly relate to you guys, my own experience that I've come from with a large number of Microsoft products. In fact, I actually think I've actually gone with Microsoft for like every I'm hard pressed to believe any Microsoft like device, and they don't build a lot of devices that I haven't onboarded with. But but specifically tablet PC and Windows Phone, but particularly Windows Phone, right? When they started paying a lot more attention to Android and iOS, I didn't pick up the signal that meant that they were getting less interested in Windows Phone. So again, that might be a not concern for you, but that might be something that you pay attention to. One other comment, Phil said in an interview with IGN that they are not trying to supplant traditional game sales with subscription revenue. And I didn't say supplant player, but they are focused on growing the subscription service and growing the revenue and having that add, right? Because their traditional game sales, again, I think I've conveyed that I've done this analysis, and you can go back and you can see those numbers. If you go back and look at where they were in 2013 and 2014, with game sales at like just above the $7 billion level, when you isolate to game sales, they are relatively flat over 10 years. They took a big crater dump, right, and bottomed out, I think, near like $4 billion in game sales, and now they're back up just over $7 billion. So in global time, when you look at how much they've spent, how many studios they've bought, and how much time has passed, they haven't necessarily moved the needle from their previous peak of $7 billion in game sales to now. Although I know that there's a large volume of that, revenue's up. That overall revenue is up, but that revenue is not up from game sales. So the point is that, as Microsoft themselves has said, they are hyper-focused on Game Pass growth, right, as a means of growing numbers. Whether or not that's necessarily concurrent with growing revenue, I don't know. But the point is that the division strategy heavily hinges on growing Game Pass subscription numbers, and that's not the same messaging that you get from Sony, which takes me down the path of, I believe, Xbox is more dependent upon growing Game Pass subscriber numbers than PlayStation is worried about growing PlayStation Plus subscriber numbers.
Yeah, that's a great point. Some of the live chat said, should we be concerned that PlayStation is no longer reporting PlayStation Now subscriber numbers?
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
Somebody in live chat asked, should we be concerned that Sony's not reporting, will no longer be reporting PlayStation Now, or not PlayStation Now, PlayStation Plus subscriber numbers?
Have they officially come out and said that? I haven't seen that.
I'm not. I think so. I think they did say that in their financials, I think, or something. I don't know. I have to go look it up.
Yeah, no, I have a difference of opinion, and I know some people are going to take it as unfair. I have a difference of opinion when a company was previously reporting numbers and stops reporting them versus a company that never reported them, or made a big deal out of what I would call a phantom metric or a phantom KPI, but never underpinned it, right? And what I mean by that is, it's so my optic on Google, who has never reported Pixel sales, right, is different than how I perceive Apple, who used to report iPhone sales and then stopped, right? They reported iPhone sales until they hit a certain growth plateau, and they were like, look, at this point, we're good enough. We don't need to keep beating people over the head. It doesn't really move the needle on us for investors. Okay, yay, we sold more iPhones than everybody else sold phones this quarter. Who cares, right? So in my view, the motivations behind that are different than, like I said, Microsoft, who never has reported numbers for Azure, right, but always talks about Azure growth. Right, but I'm like, so it grew by 22% of what? Like 22% of 1%, like it doesn't really matter. 22% of zero from zero, like doesn't really matter. So Microsoft has done that, for quite some time. So, Sony taking numbers that it's previously reported and tucking them, behind. I have a different optic on that than, the numbers never having been reported.
Yeah, Jeff B. Gaming, actually, that is true. In its financial report for the first quarter of 2023, Sony did not release the number of PlayStation Plus subscribers. That Sony instead said that it will no longer be releasing that information. This move comes as a surprise to many people. Okay, that's the rest of the article. But yes, so Sony actually confirmed that, Jeff B. Gaming, that they will no longer be sharing those numbers. Nostalgia 24/7 says Sony gathered a bunch of goodwill over the PS4 gen and now they're throwing it away. I think that's a bit hyperbolic, Nostalgia. I don't know how you would arrive to that conclusion. I don't think they're throwing it away. They continue to deliver good games. I think ultimately they're going to do fine. They're going to do fine. I don't see them throwing, unless they do something idiotic like raise triple the price of PlayStation 5 consoles and start dipping the toes in anti-consumer type practice and behavior, but I don't see that happening. And again, they continue releasing good games on their platform. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah,
it's always fascinating how people can arrive to those conclusions.
Right. Everybody's been digging for causality behind the increase, and I think the one thing I would look at is, so they are rolling out the 4K cloud gaming service streaming resolution. That's that's been rolling out to limited users now. It'll eventually become part of the premium subscription tier. And you probably think maybe, I'm not absolutely certain, but maybe your primary consumers of that type of service, well, it's only going to be on the premium subscription tier. So, having those people pay an extra $40 per year, maybe what's driving that. Again, like I constantly iterate, like data transference is a billable and priced cloud service. And so, when you transmit a bunch of data in or transmit a bunch of data out, CSPs do absolutely charge you for that. And so Sony's going to be racking up a big bill, at some level for pumping out 4K resolution. And so that would be part of the cost basis, at least for, why there might be a price increase. Not saying that justifies it, but I'm saying that would definitely be part of the, basic quantification of causality.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point, Lutch. As we know, companies like to pass the buck to consumers. So
that's true. Sony definitely doesn't take the approach of eating the cost.
No, Sony definitely doesn't do that. Nor does Nintendo. So since we're talking about subscription services, I do want to talk about this article that came out today from Game Industry, GameIndustry.biz, which, in my opinion, is the best gaming news site on the internet. If you're not following them, if on Twitter, if you're not reading or visiting their website regularly, I would encourage you to do so. They write some really great content and put out some great news stories, minus all the sensationalism stuff that we see from so Nostalgia 24/7. I'm not saying they will be in a bad spot. I'm just saying it's a bad look. What's interesting, Logic? I used to think like that, like, oh, that's a bad look, and then I started thinking about, well, how do I quantify that? Like, what is the impact of that to Sony? A bad look, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I mean, to me, and this is just my perspective, to me, when a company is performing, I personally don't necessarily equate raising prices as a bad look. When a company is underperforming and under-delivering, then I go, well, what the hell are you raising prices for? And again, people are going to disagree with it, but this was another one of my things when Game Pass raised prices. I'm like, at that point in the timeline, in my opinion, my perspective, they certainly weren't delivering what I wanted. All of the games, the vast majority of the games that they had talked about, I mean, because they raised prices a year after that June 2022 showcase. That was where they rolled out the 12-month plan that they didn't deliver on, by their own admission.
Yeah.
And so, and Starfield hadn't hit yet, obviously, and Forza hadn't hit yet, obviously, and Redfall had been a total train wreck. So I'm like, where's the justification on raising the prices? Like, again, that price raise was very small and very incremental. The pricing psychology that I felt it played on was that it crossed that line above that magical $199, right, consumer perception line. But those were the questions that I asked. I don't personally feel that the bad of the optics on this is that the price. First of all, I will say was a bad look. I do feel it was BS for them to bury it at the bottom of a PlayStation blog entry. That was not in the stinking headline. Right?
Yeah,
the headline talks about the games that are coming out on PlayStation Plus this month. And quite frankly, Yep, you would have no idea about the price increase unless you actually read through that particular thing. Which I mean, when new games are coming to PlayStation Plus, those 2 extra games, I don't necessarily pay any attention to that.
Yeah.
So that was bad handling, right, in my mind. The bad optic on this is that the price increase looks at face value to be a huge jump, right? Oh my God, an extra $40 per year, right? But people, and that's because people don't do the thing that I just talked about, where I said, okay, so we're talking about it's an extra $3.33 per month. It's $13.33 per month now. It's which is a 26% discount against the $216 that people who are month to month if they pay for the full year. And in my mind, I just did that math and said, okay, that's a nothing burger for me personally. right?
Yeah.
But for other people, right, people are going to say, oh my God, $40 a month.
Yeah, they're not going to do the math.
that's, yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it.
But again, at the end of the day, I think that still has the results that I talked about, which is you're going to have some people off board, you're going to have some people on board, you're going to have some churn, and at the end of the day, it's not going to be a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. And Ryan Lynch says a bad look for many people, families. Yeah, I don't disagree. I think some families, some consumers are going to be turned off. I think that's kind of what Logic's saying too, that yeah, there's going to be people and there's going to be some churn, but there's going to be other people that are yeah, Ryan says, I can imagine a dad who's not in this deep getting charged a lot more at the end of his year, getting upset. Yeah, there may be a dad out there, but again, I mean, I'm just always cautious about using words like many, like many people are going to be upset. I think people will be upset. I think people won't be upset. I just don't like saying, for me personally, I don't like using the word many too much because I think it.
I mean, part of what we need to put in perspective, and I don't. This doesn't make me feel good to say this, right? This is sometimes the cold math that I have to bring up that makes some people feel bad, and I hate to say it, but we need to understand that we're not necessarily in a recession, that we're in a rich session, that we have stratas of socioeconomic status that are not as negatively impacted as some other stratas are, and we need to acknowledge the fact that despite how we feel, the fact of the matter is that the average disposable income for over the last 10 years is actually 18% higher now than it was. And so people have actually made gains.
Yeah.
And I mean, you and I have talked continuously about how there's constantly rhetoric that the sky is falling down, but yet jobs keep getting added, right? And so there are people and there are pockets who are negatively impacted, but there's also a lot of people who aren't, and actually a lot of people who are doing okay. And so the question just is how many of them, fall in that bucket where that $40 is going to make a difference. And when we say $40, we're only talking about the PlayStation Plus premium subscribers, and I'm not discounting, what you said, Ryan. I think that definitely applies to some bucket of people, but I just don't know how many dads, right, are subscribed at PlayStation Plus premium, for their whole family, who are going to be impacted, I don't know.
Yeah, again, I'm not saying no dad will be upset. I'm a little cautious of saying things like many people or, it's often my frustration when I have conversations about the state of the U.S. economy with my mom. She's like, all these people are out of work. I'm like, no, they're not. Like, you can't say all these people or many people because that's not the reality of the situation. Are there people out of work? Absolutely. Are they certain segments of the job market that have been impacted more than others? Absolutely. I mean, that's just, but it's kind of the frustration, the conversation that I had with my own mother about, the economy and how she thinks we're in a recession. I'm like, no, we're not in a recession. We haven't had 2 or more straight quarters of negative GDP growth. And then she brings in China, and I'm like, what does China have to do with our GDP growth? When she talks about, China's taking over the world. Anyhow, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But to your point though, Logic, you're right. I mean, there's certain people who, again, that are going to feel the impact of this thing. Just like there's other people who felt the impact more with inflation than I did personally. I really I haven't been totally. I can't say that I haven't felt the impact of inflation. I certainly have when it comes to food, but in terms of the other areas and ability to go out and buy other products, goods, whatever. I mean, I'm still behaving the way I did even pre-pandemic and inflationary dynamics or whatever. Coming out of the COVID pandemic. So. So, Logic, you said that people have more discretionary spending within the last 18 years or the last 18 years, discretionary spending in the U.S. has gone up by what, $10,000? Or
18% of disposable income over the last 10 years.
So players like, is that from stimulus checks? I think he's asking you.
No, that's just in terms of how the salary baseline has been moving over the last 10 years in comparison to in comparison to inflation.
Yeah. Player Play says housing and rent has skyrocketed since the pandemic. Yeah, no, absolutely. It certainly has. But again, I mean, that's not something that I've been impacted by. Others have. But again, this goes back to that the how everyone's impacted differently. Whether it's recession, whether it's recessionary dynamics or inflation or price increases. Go ahead, Logic.
Well, then, I mean, I saw their comment too about, CNBC said consumer sentiment is negative on inflation, that consumers are getting killed by inflation. And yeah, again, that's an indicator of how people feel, right? But look at consumer spending over the last 12 months, right? We have had concurrent months over and over and over again of consumer spending increasing.
And,
right?
to the point where, by the way, it's driving the Fed crazy. Like the Fed's literally pulling their hair out because they can't tamper consumer spending. It's consumer spending. The economy, I mean, despite record inflation, you go back to inflation numbers that are almost as high as the late 70s. People have, the consumer spending really hasn't, it's been pretty, like you said, Logic, it's been pretty healthy for the most part.
Yeah, and Player Play, you said real wages hasn't kept up with inflation as a whole for the majority of U.S. population. And again, that's what you're saying in aggregate, and I'm agreeing with you. What I'm saying is that doesn't apply to everyone, right? And so here's what I'm trying to get at is if a socioeconomic demographic has been negatively impacted by their spending potential, but that demographic doesn't spend a whole lot of money at retail, doesn't spend a whole lot of money in the market segments that we're talking about, then it doesn't have the impact, right? And so if you're middle class to upper middle class are not being super negatively impacted by things like this, and those are the demographic of people who are spending on PlayStation Plus Premium or for PlayStation Plus at the 12-month thing, then it's not going to have the impact that some people may think it has simply because it's a price increase, because those people are less price sensitive to price increases like that. It's the and admittedly, I use extreme examples to try and drive my point home, but there are some people who are making money that don't care about a $3.33 increase on a subscription service.
Yeah.
Now they may feel about it. And Ryan said, I don't remember, any bill going on. Yeah, Ryan, I feel the same way, but that's because I also have a lot of bills that I don't care about. I get aggravated if my electricity bill goes up because yes, I need electricity, but I don't get a dopamine hit from electricity, right? And so, it's a commodity. And so, what are my feelings associated with when those prices grow up, right? Those are the types of things that I go, oh, that's BS, right? But for luxury products that I actually have, an emotional feeling associated with, I'm potentially going to be less price sensitive to those.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, again, we're not saying that there's been no impact, but to your point, Logic, I mean, not everyone's been impacted equally or the same. I mean, someone, I think Player mentioned about, housing and rent being high. We saw increases in home sales in July for the which was the second month in a row for an increase in home sales. So,
and Player, you're being emotional, right? So poor people don't buy consoles and subscription services. They do. I would argue they don't buy as much as people who have more disposable income do. I'm not saying that I don't care about them, but I'm saying that that's a quantifiable fact in the way that we expect the economy to work, particularly within a capitalist society.
Yeah. Yeah. And to his point about, wages not keeping up with inflation. Yeah, I think that is definitely true. But I mean, others have. I mean, we got an inflation adjustment for to our base compensation last year. I mean, look at your strata of tech workers who over the last few years have benefited by
tons of their work going remote, who no longer pay costs associated with commuting, no longer pay as much of a wedge of their budget in car maintenance, commuting, tolls, things of that nature, who are able to drive a lot of their own fate on a market that is highly starved for high skilled talent and to demand higher salaries.
Yeah.
And I get it, player. You're for people, consumers getting lower prices. What I'm saying is my comments are not driven by me wanting a desired outcome and my emotional attachment and a hero complex or whatever about what people want. I'm simply giving you mathematical and quantifiable facts and making statements on the economy.
All right, let me get to. I need to stop reading the chat here. I do want to get to this article by GameIndustry.biz. Weaker subscription deals have hit indie publishers, says analysts. So, Devolver and Tiny Build's. I'm going to read parts of the article here. Devolver and Tiny Build's difficult year is partially down to smaller deals coming from Sony and Microsoft. Hold on a sec here. From Sony and Microsoft. Hold on. Now the article's not loading up. I might have to make the switch to iPhone logic. Not my phone, man, has just started acting up for the last couple minutes here. Give me a sec. All right. So Devolver and Tiny Build's difficult year is partially down to smaller deals coming from Sony and Microsoft. This is according to an analyst. Smaller subscription deals and the underperformance of certain titles have had a severe impact on Devolver Digital and Tiny Build. And this is from a stockbroking firm called Goodbody. I don't know who that is. Logic. Have you heard of them? I haven't. I'm assuming they're in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who they are by name.
Yeah, both companies floated at the peak of the game business in 2021 and have seen their share prices plummet over the past 2 years. Devolver has seen its share price drop 92% since its peak in January 2022, while Tiny Builds has fallen 95%. And this is according to Patrick O'Donnell, who's a technology and video game analyst at Goodbody. He says, we have seen the Devolver and Tiny Build. We have seen from Devolver and Tiny Build that subscription is under pressure at the moment. The checks coming from Sony and Microsoft are just not as big as they were, and that creates problems. And that creates problems if you're concentrated on that side of the market. Tiny Build, out of all that was most exposed, Devolver was exposed, but not quite as much. The recent drop for Devolver followed the firm's decisions to delay a number of big titles out of its current year. It also suffered from poor year-to-year comparisons, as a publisher delivered a hit title last summer in Cult of the Lamb, which I didn't play. Expectations for Devolver this financial year were 150 million to 120 million, and they've had to go back to 90 million. The majority of this, the delay of big releases, and the majority of that is as the delay of big releases in 2024. Patrick O'Donnell believes that those are decisions. He says he thinks that those are decisions. Those are decisions for the right reasons, although investors won't like it in the short term. Also, their back catalog is resilient. Pricing is down 5%, and that's hurt their EBITDA. He said, and they don't have the big games they need to offset that anymore. Ultimately, however, O'Donnell feels Devolver is a business that has all it needs to turn things around. He says you have to look at the caliber of Devolver, the track record and quality of their products are almost always good. They have that hit-driven potential, which they've shown multiple times. That will be one of the key factors that will keep institutional investors in Devolver. Ultimately, they're protecting their IP. They did mention they had turned down some big subscription deals. And in 2024, Devolver has the next Human Fall Flat. The figures for that are overwhelming on the first edition, which was published by Curve. However, O'Donnell is concerned for Tiny Build due to disappointing performance of Hello Neighbor 2. The first game seemed like the start of a reasonable franchise, so all eyes were on the second in December 2022. The Steam data shows that it didn't do well at all. But also, The downgrade was so severe it was an 80% downgrade on their adjusted EBITDA. They had a new CFO come in who came from investor relations and didn't have CFO experience. I think institutional investors would have wanted an experienced CFO to come in hindsight. So let's see here. All right. I'm not going to read the rest of the article. This is a pretty long article, Logic.
It is. Yep.
Yeah. What, I know you've read the article. So what were some of your takeaways from this article?
Well, the one that just made me kind of sit up because I think I missed it the first time is that they're predicting that both of these publishers are ripe for acquisition, and talks about Sony having an investment position in Devolver, which would be super interesting because Devolver does a lot of stuff. But I think, to me, Devolver, there's been a lot of discussion about brand and things that fit within the PlayStation brand. And I don't know that everything Devolver does fits in the PlayStation brand, so I don't know if that would be the move. But but regardless, it's interesting that that Devolver and Tiny Build are kind of in this discussion of acquisition potential.
Yeah, that's really, especially Devolver Digital. I'm not too familiar with Tiny Build, but by the way, EBITDA, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization. So that's a term that we used to use quite a bit when I was in the staffing industry. I'm surprised I haven't seen people drum up the rumors of or drum up the conversation that Xbox should acquire Devolver Digital, because that's typically kind of where that conversation goes.
Yeah, but I will say Devolver Digital's identity does seem to fit in the current Xbox, right, which is playing on this theme of being the the plucky smaller competitor who is looking for a widely diversified portfolio of entertainment, and definitely is interested in getting smaller titles out the door, right? Which is exactly Devolver's play, But then what Devolver does is they do it at what to me is they find teams and properties to put out that do those things with a higher degree of polish, I think, than I would normally associate with publishers and developers at that end of the spectrum. So that would actually be a good fit, in my opinion, particularly with with their focus on PC titles.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point, Logic. Also, the director of publishing at Larian Studios actually commented on this article. Actually, retweeted the article. And said, "I've always been empathetic to folks who need to turn a profit on games, but at the same time, we've been asking what happens when the money dries up. The best way to support developers and publishers you like is to buy their games if you can afford it."
And that made people mad.
That made a lot of people mad. He also follows up that tweet with just a preemptive point. You cannot insult an economic model. Economics don't have feelings. It's okay to talk about these things. What's important above else is that we together build an industry where quality content can thrive and it's not devalued. Jeez, when he said that, it made me think about our conversations that we've had about the potential devaluation of software, which people get upset about when we have that conversation. People give Steam a lot of shit, but if you're interested in some bizarre mix of genres and subgenres and the game is good, there's a high chance you'll be exposed to it on Steam. This is how stores should work. They do not right now. They're ancient. To anyone who says, which is common in my experience, it's okay for him, he shipped Baldur's Gate 3. I spent 14 years of my life working on B games and indies. Haven't been consistent on this my entire career. Make the content worth buying, build an audience who wants to buy it.
Yeah, and one comment in chat, Josh Ayer says, but Devolver don't make games, right? They just publish them. No, they actually own studios. So they own, as far as I can tell, they own Crow Team now, as well as Dodge Roll, Firefly Studios, and Nereal.
Oh, I didn't know they had that many studios.
Yeah, I wouldn't call that research complete, but that's just what I'm kind of seeing off of surface search.
Yeah. But you're right. The kind of games that they crank out would probably be good additions to Game Pass.
Yeah, I mean, they're these little quirky titles,
Yeah.
That, appeal to people who maybe are making the argument that, we don't just like the AAA stuff, the big budget stuff, and definitely fits within, I think, the budgetary profile, right, that Xbox is now striving for. And Player asks, are they the Remnant publisher? That I'm not positive
I don't
of.
think they are the Remnant publisher. Yeah, I don't think they are. Let me look that up real quick. Now I'm curious.
Seems like no from a surface level check, player, but BRAP is probably off. Digging a little deeper.
Oh, that's Gearbox.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, Gearbox is the publisher.
So just way to say that got people mad. Yeah. So the conversation again, I definitely agree that Twitter reactions are not news. I jump up and down and say that all the time. But I think I'll qualify it as the misunderstanding. I think there was a reaction to the article and an interpretation of the article that it was that any criticisms of subscription as a model are a criticism against Game Pass and Microsoft, and that's not what this article did. It talked about how those publishers were being squeezed by reduced prices and reduced fees that both Microsoft and PlayStation were looking at paying for subscription content. And we've talked a little bit about this notion of enshittification. Said more elegantly as a choke point capitalism, which is a book by Cory Doctorow, and I'm going to look up her name because I don't want to slight her.
Is it Robin something?
It's Rebecca something.
Oh, Rebecca, yeah. I'm still listening to that podcast, by the way. This week in, is it This Week in Tech?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This Week in Tech, yeah.
Where they're talking about enshittification and choke point capital, and this article made me think about
Cory Doctorow and Rebecca Giblin.
Yeah, this article made me think about choke point capital or the enshittification.
Yeah, and what the theory is around is how basically with the big tech five that and tiers of technology companies below them, right? Uber and other places, that what's going on in tech right now is a lot of what publishers did in the book business and distributors did in the record business, which is they have maneuvered themselves in between the consumer and the suppliers, and they have created pathways, right, where basically suppliers have to go through them to get their products to consumers. And they've got in between them because what they offered to consumers was a way to obtain those products at a lower cost of access. And so now, for consumers, that's their preferred methodology of accessing and gaining those products. So things like subscription services, things like what Amazon has done with the book business, where that's where you want to go, where you wind up going and want to go, often out of convenience, to obtain your books. And that once they're established, they become the gatekeepers of that access pathway to that consumer base. And then what they do is they engage in practices that drain the value that used to go to these suppliers, to the upstream suppliers, and they start converting that value to themselves and lining their own pockets with it. And so what happens is they start squeezing down on the margins that go to the suppliers, right, in the name of, hey, we're trying to offer consumers, right, a cheaper price, and that's what they're willing to pay. And those consumers don't want to pay anymore. So you guys are going to have to hold the line on your prices or come down on your prices. So what do the suppliers start doing? What the suppliers start doing is they have to shave their own margin. They have to shave their own production costs. And so you wind up getting this devaluation of the types of products that are coming out on the market because they're trying to figure out ways to reduce their operating costs, right? And so you get this drainage down into the point where things start becoming commoditized, right? They start to become more of a commodity. And then what you have at the end of the day is you have a low-value business putting out low-value products. That's kind of like buying pork and chicken. So,
Pork, the
you
other
know,
way.
and so that's right. So, you know, that's in those types of behaviors, right? At the end of the day, when you look at the long term, right, those are the types of things that are not good for consumers. Now, some consumers will benefit, right? There are some consumers who they don't care about those products; they're fine with them being a commodity. But there are other consumers, right, who don't like that behavior, and maybe they'll shift to other markets. Maybe they will, you know, go after a different type of content when you talk about stuff in the entertainment space. So it's a it's a you know, it's not a good thing, right? And then it also feeds, right, the amount of control that the big tech five and some of these big tech companies have. And you know, another thing that's similar is, you know, where they talk about, you know, the shadow rule of Elon Musk and like how much power he wields, and we talk about, right, how much power, you know, these companies wind up wielding and how much influence they wind up wielding.
Yeah.
So
well, you see what Elon's doing. I mean, basically, it's kind of like with Facebook. When Facebook so started, and I think Doctor talked about Facebook, like how, like yeah, you know, it was like, okay, you can connect to people now. Now that you've connected to people, you built these relationships on this platform. Now you have to pay us. You have to buy stuff, and that's kind of what's happening, I think, with Twitter now, where, you know, we see the blue check marks, or you have to pay to get a certain to have unlimited direct messages, and that I think part of what Doctor was advocating for too is kind of a freer internet, where you don't have these situations like a Facebook or like a Twitter, where, you know, in order to stay connected to the people that you're on a social media platform that you've built relationships with, that somehow to have access to that's going to cost money, that those things should be inherently free.
right, and one of the things they talk about in choke point capitalism too is, right, when, you know, I put it in terms of like suppliers versus customers, but in creative industries, right, those suppliers are essentially the creative workers, right, and so this is a lot of what we're seeing in with the writers of the actors strike right now, right. Again, the value is being drained, you know, in certain cases that may have previously gone to actors and creatives, and, you know, there's some reaction that like, oh, well, you know, actors were paid too much money and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, that's a fine way to feel. But understand that it's not like that money is being returned to the consumers. That money is going to the businesses who have become the middlemen, right? Because they're taking all that value and they're definitely not passing it on to their consumers in terms of any more savings, right? And in the meantime, the suppliers who are on the other side of it are going to start trying to figure out a way to cut costs. Right. And at the end of the day, that means you as a consumer are going to wind up getting, you know, worse products.
Yeah. Well, you're right. I mean, part of the theory of choke point capitalism is basically, like you said, just locking in customers and locking in the suppliers. So, Logic, any other thoughts on that article?
Now, I mean, you know, all indications from that article point to, right, warning signs that we've talked about and things that we've talked about that you know, may at the end of the day not be good for everyone. You know, more acquisitions, more consolidation, you know, value being squeezed out of the upstream suppliers, right, in which is going to impact, you know, and at the meantime, you know, cost of goods sold, you know, which in the gaming industry is production costs, are going up. And so, you know, where does that balancing point wind up resting? You know, I don't know that it winds up resting in a way that's good for the gaming consumers, at least the gaming consumers who have as their priority, you know, quality.
Yeah. And
the consumers who have as their priority low cost of access may wind up being fine with it, but there are other consumers who are going to wind up getting marginalized and disenfranchised.
Yeah, we've talked about that quite a bit. And by the way, when I said these companies, I talked about controlling suppliers and customers. I actually was referring to Amazon, by the way, just for additional context. So, because that's what Amazon has done. I think Amazon's one example. I think they use quite a bit. I say they, but Corey Ductro, and I forget her name now. But I've seen
Rebecca Gilbin.
Yeah, I've seen them both use Amazon as kind of the more common example of choke point capitalism. So, Logic, I do want to move on to some Starfield related news because Starfield, the review embargo is up tomorrow, which is great. We're finally going to get an idea of some of the with some of these websites who receive review codes, what they thought of Starfield. But we did get some. Again, this is more of a rumor. Well, we know that DLSS is not going to be. That Starfield's not going to support DLSS at launch, and that it's going to be using FSR2. Now, look, I have an RTX GPU. Logic, I'm not entirely thrilled that I have to use FSR 2.0, that there's no DLSS, that there's no DLSS support of the game. That's disappointing to me. Now, was this like, I guess so Logic, was this a deal that some kind of exclusivity deal that Microsoft made with AMD? That's what I'm not clear on.
Man. I'm sorry. I'm caught off guard by the fact that you actually incorporated an article that I sent you into the agenda.
Oh, I should have warned you. Huh?
So this is about the AMD exclusivity for Starfield, and the way it's been termed and the way it's been communicated, and what people think or believe about it. So the first article over on TechSpot by Daniel Sims, AMD denies blocking Bethesda from adding DLSS to Starfield. Starfield DLSS mod locked behind a paywall. So this is actually a two-parter. As AMD unveiled two new graphic cards to round out the RDNA 3 lineup, it also tried clarifying some recent controversy regarding its agreements with game developers. As the company unveils a hardware bundle for Starfield, the details on whether it will support DLSS remain unclear. On Friday, AMD Chief Architect of Gaming Solutions Frank Azor said that if Bethesda wanted to implement rival NVIDIA's DLSS upscaling technology in its upcoming RPG Starfield, AMD would not stand in the way. Quote, if they want to do DLSS, they have AMD's full support, Azor told The Verge, adding that nothing is blocking Bethesda from using it. There's another article that I caught which fleshed out his comments a little bit more and mentions that, he indicates that, look, when we do these deals, money does change hands, right? It's not, it's not just goodwill. And he quotes, when we do bundles, we ask them, are you willing to prioritize FSR? If they ask us for DLSS support, we always tell them yes. Bethesda's decision to use FSR is console leverage. If and when Bethesda wants to put DLSS into the game, they have our full support. So AMD, we see this quite often actually from AMD, where something goes down that is a matter of discussions or agreements that AMD had with some other vendor. And we see this on their hardware sometimes too. And then on the hardware side, there's often pointing out fingers of whose fault the thing is. But in this case, what AMD is saying is like, look, we made an exclusive deal for them to prioritize FSR. We didn't tell them that they could only do FSR. So only doing FSR is a Bethesda choice. And if they want to add DLSS, they can. The other factor, the other dynamic compounding into this is that, around Starfield, there's been the conversation about mods and mod support. And lots of people have, both championed and slagged Bethesda for, the fact that Starfield is obviously going to be oriented around mod support. There's lots of things about, mods are going to save Starfield is a mid game and mods are going to save it. And then there are lots of people who are like, Starfield is a great game and mods are going to make it even better. So there's a popular modder, a well-known modder who has been working on DLSS, and I think XCSS as well. But what that person's going to do is they put the mods behind
a paywall.
Yep. Yeah. So, in the article quotes, users have criticized Pure Dark's policy of locking downloads behind $5 Patreon contributions. One Star Wars Jedi Survivor player warned that while a single payment grants access to the latest version of that game's DLSS mod, downloading patches requires a continuous subscription. However, Pure Dark is not the only modder making DLSS patches. Other modders could just as easily bring DLSS 2 to Starfield for free. Now, an IGN editor, I don't know what her last name is, Stella, whatever, got dragged a little bit today for posting a commentary where part of her commentary was, you know, the her judgment of a game, and she feels a consumer's judgment of a game should not be based on mods. It should be based on the game. And despite her being dragged and being criticized, I will say the exact same thing. I don't look. A game needs to pass my threshold of wanting to onboard with it, and that's not dependent on mods. Mods is a great benefit. It's, you know, icing on the cake. It's a great add. I don't personally pull down mods. Just the way I prefer to play and the way that I prefer to keep my systems is I want vendor provided content. I don't like part of my life being having to sift through, right, the chaff and find what's good versus, you know, the not so good stuff. I mean, the one thing that I use mods with is World of Warships, and that's because there's kind of almost a commercial model or approach towards bundling all those mods up into a common download package and managing them through there. And that's the only reason I do it, is because it's convenient. So my point is that the entire market is not driven to onboard or support or have a good feeling about a game based on mods. There's a part of the market that is. And so, you know, the notion that today DLSS may only be added to Starfield as a mod, to me, is problematic. If Bethesda implements it as a vendor, you know, then that's different. And so part of this conversation is around how does this wind up landing with people? You know, the fact that DLSS won't be present at launch.
Like I said, I'm one of the RTX NVIDIA fanboys that is not happy that DLSS is not going to be there. I would prefer that over FSR, in my opinion. That's a better solution.
Yeah, and it's a good comment by Captain Ply. It says, but the game Starfield is so well made, why does it need FSR and DLSS? And I know there was I think you know, there's a twinge of sarcasm in asking that question. But I will say, you know, my feeling is, I mean, I think, you know, I would love to hear Slow-Mo's perspective on this. I don't know that he's in this camp, but I know that there's a lot of people who, you know, say, you know, a game should be good and a game should be optimized and it shouldn't be dependent upon DLSS and FSR, these, you know, acceleration techniques to make the game performant. And I just where I land today, to me, they're just part of the driver package. Like, if they're available in the game, I'm going to turn them on. To me, they're no different. Like, they're a software implementation that's an organic, integrated part of the solution. I don't know why I would have a problem with that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't have an issue with it. I know there's some people that have an issue with DLSS implementation, but I'm not one of those. I use it. I'm actually using it right now in Baldur's Gate 3. I'm using balance mode on DLSS to, you know, keep those frames at 120 FPS. So, yeah, Kratopsy, I agree with you. DLSS is way better than FSR, and Starfield is apparently demanding. Do you have any other? Because there's another Starfield topic I want to get to. Logic. Anything else with this article that you want to discuss?
Nope. Go right ahead.
Yeah, because Kratopsy brings a point about Starfield being demanding. I thought that might be a good segue to this article by Dark-Sided Gaming, which you also sent me earlier in the week. According to this article, Starfield reportedly runs with 45 to 60 FPS at a 1440p high settings on NVIDIA's RTX 2080 Ti. The article said, that's the headline. The article goes on to say Starfield that according to a leak, an AMD Ryzen 3800X with an NVIDIA RTX 2080 Ti can run Starfield with 45 to 60 FPS frames per second at 1440p high settings most of the time. In Dungeons in Space, the aforementioned PC system can push 60 to 70 frames per second. Oh, and that's with FSR 2.0 enabled, by the way. So this is with FSR. So for gaming at native 1440p high settings, you'll need a more powerful PC system than this. Unfortunately, the leaker's not shared any in-game screenshots with performance overlay from Starfield, thus we can't say whether these drops are due to the CPU or the GPU. What we do, however, is the game's graphics settings. So Bethesda has included numerous graphic settings to tweak. So in theory, PC gamers will be able to improve performance by dropping some of them. Sadly, these graphic settings do not include any CPU, GPU usage information or a window to showcase the graphical changes. So what are your thoughts here, Hamp, on this particular leak and this article?
So I will say, if you're going to leak something, this might be a good example of how to leak something, because him not including screenshots or anything, I guess means that this person must be a reviewer with a review code, right? Mm-hmm. And the fact that they didn't link screenshots means that they probably didn't cut across the NDA. So I'm pretty actually impressed by what I think seems like a savvy play on getting information out there while not cutting your nose off to spite your face and breaking NDA. Mm-hmm. So lots of people have extrapolated, so this will mean that everything on Xbox is fine. Some people have said, extrapolated off of...
I had that conversation too, Logic, because I posted this article and someone's like, oh, well, yeah, we know that. The Series X runs those... runs at that same performance or whatever the guy said to me, and what I was referring to was that what we don't know is what the graphical settings for the Xbox are going to be. Obviously, yeah, the Xbox can run 1440p, up to 120 FPS, but not necessarily all at the same graphical settings as a higher end PC. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and as far as we know, that mode specification won't even be feasible, right? It's, as far as we know, you're just getting a 4K 30, 4K 60, or 4K. I can't remember, what is it? Is it 4K 30 on the Series S? Or is it just 4K 30? I think 4K 30 versus 1440p 30. Yeah. I can't remember. The point is that, as far as I know, what we heard was that there's just going to be one performance profile spec per console, and that's what you're going to get. So the point is that at whatever performance profile you're at, you don't really know what the setting parity is going to be in comparison to this person's settings versus the Xbox. The other thing is, a lot of people have platformed off of this to extrapolate what they expect to get out of PC performance, and in that, I just think there are some pockets where your calculations may not be exactly correct. Remember that the 2080 Ti is a high performance card from that generation. I can't remember whether the Ti came out first or the Super came out first, but it's either like the most performant card from that generation or the second most. And in those cases, when those high performance cards come out from NVIDIA, there will continue to be for many years points where those cards outperform the follow-on generations at the lower end SKUs. So there are applications in which the 2080 Ti will outperform a 3000 series GPU at a lower SKU level. Also keep in mind, a lot of people are going to be playing these on laptops, and the 2080 Ti will definitely outperform some later generations of cards in the laptop area. And depending on exactly how you tweak and you set things up, may still in some applications outperform a 4000 series card at the lower end of the SKU. Depending upon, whether or not you turn on ray tracing, yeah. So I don't, and the fact that this was a build that was performing theoretically without updated drivers from NVIDIA. And what we don't know is that whether or not the typical NVIDIA drivers that typically drop a day before or the same day as a big gaming release, whether or not they're going to do anything to improve how NVIDIA handles FSR. It's quite honestly, it's tough for me because I haven't given it a ton of thought, but it's tough for me to assess whether or not NVIDIA would feel incentivized to improve their FSR performance, given that Bethesda's hasn't implemented DLSS. Now, maybe those conversations have been had and they know that it's coming, and so there's not necessarily a reason for them to not do it, but we just don't know. So, again, where I sit is that we don't know what the performance profile of this thing is going to be coming out. We had some different consumers throw out benchmarks of what their expectations were and where they would be upset. I can't remember what did he say. Was it Brian, who's a mod?
Brian Baker, yeah, Delirium Blades, yeah.
Yeah, so Brian said he wants 100 frames per second or greater, or he's going to be bothered. I said I want 80 frames per second, or I'm going to be bothered. And I said 80 at 1440p in ultra widescreen, aspect ratio. So it's remaining to be seen. I've got the machine set up and prepped where I'm going to initially load it, and that machine runs a 3070 Ti, but it runs a 5600X CPU. So I'm going to see how it performs there, and I hope get a feel of whether or not it's how much it's CPU bound, and then from there I have options with a 5950X and a 7950X to bump it up to see if So I've got some machines where I'll be able to have an opportunity to see some different performance profiles on how the game performs once it drops.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping for 60 FPS at 1440p. I have a 3070 and a Intel. Oh, well, God, I forgot what CPU I have. I think I have
12,700K.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Kurtasi's in the chat. Kurtasi, what do you think, man? Can I get 1440p at 60 with a 3070 and a 12,700K CPU? I'll wait for Kurtasi to respond.
While we're waiting for that, Captain Ply makes a good question. Starfield has ray tracing. I don't know. Maybe somebody has. Maybe Cryptopsy or somebody else can do better analysis than I can. I brought that question up when I saw the supposed AMD performance profiles that they supposedly had put out, although that website didn't link back to an AMD source.
Starfield would not support ray tracing or FSR 3.0. That at least at launch. That's according to this article by Dark Side of Gaming.
Okay, well, I mean, there you go. I don't think DSOG operates off of fully corroborated information. So again, there may be pockets where that's not entirely accurate, but it's a good starting place for now.
Kurtas is saying with a 3070, you would need a bit of overclocking on the GPU and a bit of medium-high settings. Yeah, I'm not overclocking my GPU. I may play around with the resolution, scale that down a little bit before I do that, and mess with the high settings. I probably will have a mix of medium and high settings.
And he's saying that's for you to get how many frames per second?
1440p 60.
Okay.
Yeah, just by saying median settings for BRAP.
Gotcha.
I need my high settings, man. Kurtopsy says overclocking GPUs easy. I have a small guide on Twitter. I'll have to DM you, Kurtopsy, then. Maybe. I'm just curious to see how the FSR 2.0 implementation is going to work. Like if it's going to be, because I feel like with 4090 for BRAP, I should get a 4090, but I won't. I'm just curious to see how that FSR 2.0 implementation works. If it works well.
Yeah, to me, it's not. I don't even care if it's FSR or DLSS. It's just a matter of just flat out the way that the game performs. Like if the game is not performant, I don't see that as AMD's fault, right? But Bethesda was the one who made the options and made the choices, and it's on them, right, to make the game, desirable.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't disagree. Yeah, I'm sorry. 3.0. That's what I meant. 3.0 is coming. That's what I meant. 3.0.
Yeah. So it's gonna have. So it's got 2.0 at launch, right? Yeah. And then right now we haven't gotten official corroboration on when FSR 3.0 is coming. I mean I've pitched a suspicion that they'll target getting it out in November to compete against DLSS 3.5 because we know that's the target for NVIDIA, but we just don't know for certain when FSR is coming out. 3.0.
Yeah, Kurtops is saying the FSR is typically a bit more unstable, could break up a bit, have some artifacts. It can be hit or miss. And then he's saying if FSR 3.0 gets updated on Starfield, it could help. I mean, if I gotta bite the bullet and play medium settings, I'll do that, or maybe I'll overclock the GPU like Cryptopsy suggested, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, of my concerns of Starfield, DLSS versus FSR is not it's not way up high on the list. I mean, it's a nit, but I'm not gonna dance a jig or fall down, based on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, where I'm gonna fall down is if the game's just not performant. Period. Right, but I'm not gonna necessarily put that blame on FSR or DLSS.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah. No, I'm not getting a 490. I'm not going to do that. I'm not. If I was getting a 490, I probably would have got one already. I'm going to wait for the 50 series cards. All right, Logic. So tomorrow, the review embargo's up. We'll get reviews for Starfield. Not
till noon. Not till noon though, and that sucks.
Yeah, that does suck. Is it? Hold on. I thought it was. Let me check.
It's noon Eastern time.
That's kind of late in the day.
That's what I thought.
It's usually like a review embargo's like. I thought they usually like.
It's usually like 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
But I think it's 9 o'clock in the morning Pacific time. Yeah, so Starfield's review embargo is over at noon Eastern time tomorrow, with the game launching at 8 p.m.
Oh, it does launch at 8 p.m. tomorrow? Yep, game release 8 p.m. Eastern time. Okay, so we'll be able to play it tomorrow then.
Really? I thought early access was until the 1st.
That's what I thought. But I've seen a couple articles like say
okay, let the dogs loose, huh?
Yeah, I mean, so
So my 2 Constellation editions are inbound. They appear to be on schedule.
Where's Falky? I need Falky to pre-download Starfield right now because they're going to be able to play it in a couple hours. Like Christopher K. The live chat says, we'll play New Zealand in a few hours.
Yeah.
But you could also set your Xbox to a different region, though, right?
I'm wondering. I can't remember. Well, you no. As far as I understand, you have to both do that, right, or VPN and tunnel out in that region on a PC. But you also have to have an account tied to that region.
Yeah, where is Falky? We need Falky to download this game so we can get early Starfield impressions. Why does on Steam it says for me coming September 6th, 2023. Okay, maybe that's because they're just showing me the official release date then. But I could pre-download it on Steam right now. I hope I got the right one. I think I did. Pay 9. Anyhow, go ahead, Logic. You were saying?
No. Yeah, my like I said, my 2 Constellation editions appear to be inbound and tracking to be delivered on time. I'm quadruple checking them now at this point. I keep checking every few hours just to make sure there's no shenanigans.
Oh man, I'm thinking about uninstalling Halo Infinite here. I don't play it anymore. Anyhow, all right. I'm gonna give my Metacritic predictions for Starfield. I'm gonna say it's gonna be 89 Metacritic when it's all said and done. I guess one of the things that and I'll share this with the audience. I know you and I talked about this today, but coming off of Baldur's Gate 3, one of the concerns that I have is kind of judging Starfield based on my experience of Baldur's Gate 3. I don't think that's a fair comparison because they're different types of RPGs. But that's kind of my concern going into Starfield. I'm hoping that that doesn't taint my perspective or experience of Starfield, and that I go back and start comparing it to Baldur's Gate 3. And please, everyone in the live chat, give me your Metacritic predictions as well for the Starfield reviews. But that's probably my biggest concern. Logic is am I going to judge the game not on its merit, just being based on the Starfield experience? Because I'm really, Baldur's Gate 3, and I said this earlier, is such a great game. I'm really enjoying it. But I think part of that too, that thought that I have of comparing it to Baldur's Gate 3 may also come from, because Baldur's Gate 3 has done something, in my opinion, that RPGs haven't done. And we talked about this earlier. Like, I think you brought up a great point earlier in the day when you said that Baldur's Gate 3 had kind of gone back to more traditional PC RPGs. We've kind of gone away from that, where the RPGs have been a little more. Was it streamlined? Was that the word you used? I don't.
No, I did not use the term streamlined.
Okay.
Streamlined would have been a complimentary term. I used the term diluted.
Diluted. Okay.
Dumbed down.
I knew it was something. But I was thinking like streamlined in terms of like the dialogue trees, But yes, dumbed down would be. But yeah, I mean, no, I thought that was a great point, and to me, it was the part about Baldur's Gate 3 that I enjoy so much is that it's a very refreshing experience, and not only that, I mean, it really builds upon the old PC, RPGs of the past, brings it forward to in 2023, and puts kind of more of a I don't know how to describe it, just a. I think I said this earlier because of, with when we look at the technology and how technology allows game creators to tell stories in ways they couldn't before. I really think that Baldur's Gate 3 delivers in that, delivers on that. And I don't know that Starfield will really move the needle forward for Bethesda type games. And I'm wondering if it's just going to be more of the same. Well, I think Todd Howard's ambition was great. And I said this to you 20 years ago, building these epic open world RPGs where you can do anything you want. I also believe sometimes less is more. And I also, part of me wants to see improvements because we have newer hardware. We have more powerful hardware. So I'd like to see from Todd Howard and company, I'd like to see improvements in gameplay or design. And maybe we'll get some of that. But those are the things that I'm going to be looking for in Starfield.
Yeah, I mean, my own thoughts and kind of maybe where this thing is going to go is, and look, if you want to take a bathroom break or grab a cup of coffee, now's a good time because this is good. This is a long thread. So for the chat, so number one, my own feelings of what I've seen about Starfield. And what I'm hearing from Bethesda and what I'm hearing from Microsoft is that Starfield is a game. Starfield is not a game; it is a platform. As much as Halo Infinite was supposed to be, as much as Destiny 2 was supposed to be. It's the expectation that this is a game you're going to be playing for 10 years. And so when you're doing that from a creative aspect, you build, in game development and in software engineering, right? You build both a shell of an infrastructure in terms of code, in terms of a software architecture, and then there's also a conceptualization of a creative space for people to build things in. And so my own personal feeling and kind of what I've seen from Todd Howard over the last, couple of decades is that I personally think he is very hyper-focused on building systems and building that software architecture. I don't know that he always lands the development team building in robust storytelling at launch, and putting the hooks in there that are necessary to build that creative fabric. So that's my personal thought of, again, what I've seen from Todd, what I've heard from Todd, what I feel like I'm seeing is that I think the scope and scale of Starfield is overly ambitious. I don't know that it's going to land that creative fabric that's been structured for people at launch. I think that's why I'm predicting an 83 or an 84 for Metacritic score, because I think that's where it's going to fall down. But I think from a business perspective, I think Microsoft at the end of the day will be fine with that, because they're going to drop DLC. This game is going to live for 10 years, and they're going to monetize it over the next 10 years. Like, they're going to be selling version 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 of Starfield for the next 10 years at $70. And then the people who buy it this year, you're going to buy the DLC, the paid DLC that comes out for it, right, to continue expanding the story. And the world's going to change, and there are going to be other opportunities to go down rivulets and all that type of stuff. And then, like, the remainder of that business model remains to be seen, right? They're theoretically not doing battle passes and season passes, but I feel like the world is going to change, and so how are you going to onboard people coming in for the first time versus the people who have been there for a while, yada yada yada. But that's where I feel the game is going to be at launch. The conversation we were having today, and like how people may, like, I don't think the gamer in the thick part of the bell curve is gonna run any comparisons in their mind between Baldur's Gate and Starfield. But I think an important thing that hasn't really been talked about a lot,
except for me,
right? I think an important thing that hasn't been talked about a lot with regards to Baldur's Gate is, if you go back a few years ago, there were articles being written, and I think I wrote one, about how the computer-based RPG, the crapic genre, had kind of become diluted, and how so much of it had gone down the path of action RPGs, and so many things were just first-person shooters with RPG elements. And what had been drained out was player provenance and the real aspects of role play. And so what people had kind of become accustomed to and what had been institutionalized across the industry was that making dialogue choices, binary dialogue choices, and going down the path of being light side or dark side, that was role playing. And when you go back to RPGs, the inception of RPGs in pen and paper, that is absolutely not role playing.
No, it's
right?
not at all. Yeah.
And you go back and you look at the D&D rules, and I forget, I want to say, the D&D rules at different inflection points. I mean, it started off very simple, but like the core thing that's in my mind is, at the end of the day, you came down with like 9 different alignments, right? Lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good, lawful neutral, neutral, chaotic neutral, lawful evil, neutral evil, chaotic evil. And in pen and paper, you were able to actually, play those things out. And each of those would drive a different way that you should be represented by you reacting a different way in different situations. And initially, when you go back to the early 2000s, that was being translated into games. And, your way and your approach of playing a game was incentivized to funnel you down those paths, and to not just make this simple kind of Jedi Survivor, Jedi Academy approach of either being a light Jedi or a dark Jedi, but that's the line that got drawn between being a true crapig to those simplified approaches to role playing, culminating in things like Mass Effect, right, where you had basically 2 really essential ways of kind of being your shepherd. I think Baldur's Gate 3 is a return to kind of these 9 points of light in terms of alignment, and really providing you the opportunity to role play. And so what gets talked about right now with Baldur's Gate 3 in terms of, has the bar been raised in the industry? Should these now be the expectations of all game developers, and particularly all game developers doing RPGs? And then the pushback on that about like, oh no, nobody should expect things to be about. All those topics in my mind are about the wrong thing. They're about scope, and they're about scale, and they're about graphical fidelity, and they're about hours of content, and things that in my mind are very rudimentary and very basic with your decomposition and regard for game design and implementation. I feel like the conversation really needs to be focused on has Baldur's Gate 3 really raised the bar and expectation of getting back to true role-playing as represented by the graphics of the late 90s and early 2000s? And has Baldur's Gate 3 raised the bar in terms of creating and broadening a demographic of gamer who really wants to get back to having a wide span of player provenance? And if that is the case, I think you're going to have some small part of the bell curve of game reviewers who may see things through that lens when they review Starfield. I don't think that it's going to, that's going to be statistically significant. As one person put in the chat, like particularly with regards to like Xbox itself, I think what's going to drive that is more Xbox fandom and review scores that come out than any notion of really deep critical thinking about game design. But that to me is the dynamic that I'm waiting to see, is whether or not the impact of Baldur's Gate 3 on the industry is to provide these experiences that allow me more than just picking what path I want to run down a skill tree, and whether or not I'm a good guy or a bad guy, and whether or not we're going to see this, greater availability of games that really focus on giving you provenance, right? And right now, from what we've seen from the Starfield design, Starfield's going to allow you to pick your class, pick your faction, and pick your, I guess, what is like your background story or your history. But I don't know that whether you're a scoundrel or I don't know, come from from a law enforcement background or whatever. But I don't know that necessarily translates into kind of what my expectations are in terms of these original, like the exponential breadth of the original 9 alignments in terms of the D&D sense.
Wow. Yeah, so we'll find out tomorrow, 12 p.m. What the critics thought of Starfield. So it's going to be should be a good time tomorrow. So I won't be paying attention to many of the Xbox influencers and their review scores because I'm not going to put much faith in them in being critical of Starfield. So, but yeah, no, this is, like I said, this is the start of the show. This is one of my most anticipated games of 2023. I'm excited to play it. I've really enjoyed the marketing behind Starfield. I even said this today on Twitter that Bethesda tweeted out a song by the Imagine Dragons for Starfield, and I thought that was the kind of marketing that I'd like to see more from Xbox first party games. So, but we'll see. As you said, Logic, we'll see if they stick the landing.
Yeah, I really hope. I don't know who Metacritic's. I hope Metacritic is planning on doing something for resilience at noon tomorrow, because otherwise that site's coming down.
What's that?
I said I really hope that they're doing something to bolster resilience for the website tomorrow. Otherwise that website is coming down at noon tomorrow.
Yeah,
it's gonna get hit with more traffic than it can deal with. I hope, and I hope, Google, who owns a lot of the DNS nodes, and Cloudflare and Metacritic have all made plans for tomorrow.
If not, you're right. That site's gonna go down. And there's always OpenCritic.
Yeah, for the whole 3 points of float that there typically is between the OpenCritic score and the Metacritic score.
Yeah, exactly.
But OpenCritic's more reliable and more credible.
Yeah. So, well, look, Logic. That's all I have for topics tonight. Anything else you wanted to discuss quickly, or?
No, man. I think we filled out a lot of content there.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a great conversation. And everyone, please, if you're playing Starfield tomorrow, enjoy the early access. Don't spoil it for anyone, please. No spoilers. But yeah, I can't wait for tomorrow. Looking forward to finally playing Starfield. And Logic, I'm looking forward to hopefully some pictures, man. Maybe an unboxing of the Constellation Edition.
I do not do unboxings, sir.
Oh man.
But if I get them in time, I'll definitely snap some unboxed pics. Sure. I don't know if I'll put them up on Twitter because, like I said, I only log into Twitter when I need to post my YouTube content. The conversation over there has become unworthy of my time.
I hear you. So, also want to give a big thank you to everyone in the live chat for hanging out with us this evening. Really appreciate everyone for showing up. Please hit that like button if you haven't done so already. Subscribe. Hit the bell notifications so you're alerted when we go live. And I may do a BRAP rant on the review scores tomorrow if I have time in the afternoon. I may do that and just discuss some of the reviews that have been posted on Metacritic and just talk about just a quick summary of some of those reviews and what some of the reviewers thought of Starfield. So, but other than that, everyone have a great rest of the week. And Logic, I don't know if you want to be found, but if you do, let everyone know they can find you.
Yeah, probably two primary places. You can check me out on the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast over on the E2KG Network podcasting channel. That is Sunday nights at 8:45 p.m. It'll just be Talmaster and I this Sunday. Did I say Friday? Sunday nights at 8:45 p.m. Eastern. It'll just be Tal and I this Sunday. DBQ has to work, but he and I both have early access to Starfield, and we'll definitely be talking about it in a non-spoilery way as much as we can. If you're okay with spoilers, I am going to break protocol. Little known fact, not fact, but just a side quest here. The way I grew up in a school system where in a school where it was not considered cool to wear your new clothes to school on the first day. And so kids who came in their new clothes would typically get bullied and get like their new shirts and sweaters and stuff pulled on. So typically I don't play games like the day that they launch or the first day. I'm just like, whatever, I have it. It goes in the backlog. But anyway, I work in agile software development, so I run my entire life out of the notion of a backlog. But I will be breaking protocol, and I am going to actually rush the FOMO gates and start playing Starfield as soon as I possibly can. And so I just actually set up my production rig for this weekend, and I will be posting some Let's Plays of Starfield. So if you want to check those out, you can check those out over on the Rounding Off Infinity gaming channel on YouTube.
Yeah. By the way, player, there are reviews that are spoiler free, so you can definitely, check those out. But no, Logic, thank you. It's always a pleasure. And again, thank you everyone in the live chat. If you want to give me a follow on X or Twitter, whatever it's called, BRAP_podcast. As I mentioned, I may do a BRAP rant tomorrow on Starfield reviews as they come in. So just give me a follow on Twitter so you're updated, or subscribe. That way you're notified via YouTube when we go live. So thank you, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.